Hello, friends. This is Aaron Summers, and welcome to the Church Brain Podcast. Each week, we're going to help church leaders like yourself navigate stress and transition with a calm, practical leadership guidance for real ministry situations. Well, let's jump into today. Now, this week in our weekly briefing, we went through what I call the 5 doors of transition. Every church goes through these transition seasons. Pastor leaves, leadership changes, community changes, attendance shifts, conflict surfaces, any one of these things. And churches usually think they're working through just one issue, but in reality, several pressures are happening all at the same time. Leadership change with grief or anxiety, conflict that also brings anxiety or pressure. There's uncertainty about what the future may hold. All of these things can, come all at the same time. So what are we going to do? Well, one of the things that I see in churches is leaders trying to solve only the visible problem. So they think, well, we just need to get a pastor, or we just need better attendance, or let's get more money in here. Let's start a new program. But underneath, there's grief or fatigue, or maybe even unresolved conflict. And if you don't deal with the root issues, they're just going to keep coming back. I mean, you know the classic illustration, right? You can mow the weeds down and they're going to come back. But if you uproot the weeds, then they don't come back in the same way. Of course, weeds always come back, but they don't come back in the same way. And if leaders only fix the surface issue, the deeper pressures follow to the next pastor or the next leadership team, or the chairman of that conflict committee passes it off to the next one, and it just continues to go if we don't deal with the issue at hand. So here's 3 leadership moves that I would suggest to you, no matter what transitional state you may be in. Here's the first one. Name the realities honestly. Don't pretend nothing's happening. Stuff is going on. You have grief or loss. Churches that I have worked with are dealing with this. A pastor leaves. That's the famous one. Pastors leave. And when they do, people are grieving that loss. Either the loss of the man himself, or the loss of the positional leadership, or the staff is grieving that they don't have this leader shepherd anymore, or maybe there's conflict in the church. That's a reality. Sometimes pastors leave because there was conflict. Sometimes pastors leave because they were the conflict. But reality says we may have conflict, and what are you doing with that? Are we going to sweep that under the rug and just assume it doesn't happen? No, deal with that. The attendance is low. That's a reality. Let's not pretend it isn't happening. When the leadership team begins to talk about it, let's not pretend like we don't have half the attendance we used to have. Let's deal with it. Let's don't pretend that we don't have the finances we once did. Let's not keep moving forward and act like that's not an issue, because it's going to create its own conflict if we don't. Here's the second thing. Slow down. I know, it's too easy, right? But slow down the process. Slow it down enough to understand what pressures are actually present. Because we can just try to power through a transition. We can just power through these things, and we don't ever deal with the issues. I served a church that in some ways did that. They just kind of powered through and brought on the next leadership, brought on the next pastor, brought on the next staff, and never once wanted to actually work through what they had. In fact, they wanted to ignore, deny they even had issues. You would rather take 6 months more than to repeat a pastor search in 18 months. You don't want to do it. I don't want to do it. You don't want to do it. None of us want to do it. So what do we do? Well, in slowing it down, encourage some listening sessions, pull some groups together, ask good questions, listen to their answers. Don't offer the solution, just seek out what's going on. Listen to your people. Don't decide in that moment either. Don't decide right now, okay, well, let's do this. No, take time and pray over it. pray through it, and decide what it is that you need to do. So we're going to name the reality. We're going to slow the process down. And then the third thing is just help the congregation see this moment of transition as preparation. So often we look at it like it's punishment, right? It's disruption. Well, if we can only get back to what we once had. No, we'll never get back. We just have to move forward. So we have to look at these moments as preparation. Maybe this is the time for healing to happen in your church. Maybe this is time to prepare for a new season of ministry, or to prepare for a new community outreach or a new community view. Maybe this is just a time to reset everything, to have a hard conversation about everything. What needs to be reset? What needs to adjust? And heaven forbid, what might need to change. Transition seasons are uncomfortable, but they often prepare churches for healthier futures if leaders will simply handle them with wisdom and grace and patience. Well, thank you for spending a few minutes with me today. Remember, you're not leading alone. God is at work in your church, even when the progress feels slow. If this conversation was helpful, consider sharing it with another church leader who may need encouragement this week. And if you haven't already, subscribe to the Church Break and receive both a weekly briefing and this podcast every week. Have a great day.